Thanks, everyone. I'll just start with the acknowledgement of country. So we acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands and waterways on which we work and live. We acknowledge all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities and pay our respects to elders past and present. As the first peoples of this land, belonging to the world's oldest living cultures, we recognise and value their knowledge and ongoing role in shaping and enriching the story of Victoria. So welcome, everyone. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. For those of you who don't know me, I am Angeline Garces, and I am the Director of Water and Local Government here at the ESC. While new to this role, I have been a Director of Local Government for some time and have had past roles at the Commission working in the water regulation. So the purpose of today's session is to build your understanding of the Commission's compliance and enforcement priorities and how these apply to the water sector. We want you to have a better understanding about how the Commission approaches its compliance and enforcement functions, including how we decide what compliance matters might progress to an enforcement outcome. We will also examine what you can expect when working with the Commission when you identify matters you consider may have material impact on customers. I will talk about what you can expect when working with my team. That includes Lucy, Anne and Adriana, and Sharon will talk about what you can expect if your matter has been referred to the Commission's Specialist Investigation and Enforcement team. I will also share some reflections on the past 19 months so you can improve your own self-reporting and compliance. So joining me for today's session, we have Commissioner Rebecca Billings, who has a role in guiding and supporting the Commission's work in the water sector, and the Director of Compliance and Enforcement, Sharon Deano, who among her responsibilities leads the Commission's enforcement activities. So just a bit of housekeeping for the session. We are recording the session and we will send a link to it along with a short survey at the end. We're also interested in your questions, and you can use the chat or raise your hand to ask a question, and we'll answer these at the end of the session. Now it is my pleasure to hand over to Commissioner Rebecca Billings.
Thanks, Angeline, and good afternoon, everyone. I have hopefully met a number of you one way or another through the new customer contributions workshops or my meetings with individual water businesses or at the Vic Water Conference most recently. As Ange said, I am the Commissioner who takes a special interest in the water sector as the sponsoring Commissioner, and you'll see a bit more of me in particular over the coming months. I'm in my second term as a part-time Commissioner here at the Essential Services Commission. But just to give you a bit of more flavour and context, I'm also a Commissioner at ESCOSA, so responsible for regulating SA Water and a number of small water businesses in South Australia. And I am also the chair of the National Regulators Community of Practice. So I have a particular passion for best practice regulation. We are really pleased that you have taken the time to hear from us about our compliance and enforcement strategies today. We want, as Ange said, we really want to have a discussion with you to help you understand how our regulatory posture applies to the water sector and the compliance and enforcement priorities that we have set. I'd like to just take a couple of minutes to give you a bit of context with regards to the Commission's strategic plan that was released a few months ago, our plan for 25 to 2029. It sets out our purpose, which is that we promote the long-term interests of Victorian consumers with respect to price, quality and reliability of essential services. And our vision is fair and dependable essential services today and tomorrow. This vision and purpose help guide us to make sure that Victorian consumers are at the centre of all of our decisions. When we developed the strategy, we developed 4 domains that guide our work. And these are included on the slide that has just popped up for you. And I won't read them out word for word because you can read at the same time as me speaking. But in regards to the water sector, efficient pricing is obviously front and centre for us. And you will all know that we are about to embark on the price review process for Melbourne Water and North East Water to prepare for their new price determination period in July 2026. We also obviously approve the annual tariffs for all water businesses, and we have been engaging quite extensively over the past little while in regards to a new customer contributions framework. With respect to equitable services, for the water sector, you will hear things in terms of us updating our Getting to Fair initiative, which is absolutely core to our organisation. And you will have already been engaging with us in regards to updating our better practice in responding to family violence handbook and through all of our safety and design work. With regard to resilience and sustainability, our key focus for the water sector is about thinking about the long term and the long-term investment that is required for the water sector in terms of infrastructure and sustainability of the water sector into the long term. And that will be incorporated as part of our Primo improvement project. And finally, integrity and trust. For us, this is really about further developing our water compliance framework and integrating water into the Commission's compliance and enforcement policy. And it is about us communicating that we will use our enforcement tools when necessary and undertake enforcement actions for breaches where we see fit. And that's what we're obviously focusing on today. With regards to compliance and enforcement priorities, as part of our strategic planning, we developed a set of Commission-wide compliance and enforcement priorities that will help to create impact across those 4 domains. Our priorities focus on matters that can cause the most serious customer harm. So we are focused on customer impact. The priorities help us to strategically manage our compliance and enforcement work while providing transparency to our stakeholders about where we are focusing our attention. Compliance and enforcement priorities are now on the slides in front of you. The priority 1 is in regards to taking action to address practices that exacerbate cost of living pressures. And I'm sure that it will be no surprise to all of you as cost of living pressures continue to impact many Victorians. We are prioritising action against conduct that contributes to these pressures or seeks to exploit them. Priority 2 is regarding holding businesses accountable where they fail to provide consumers experiencing vulnerability with fair and equitable access. We will monitor and act where we identify predatory practices or behaviours that exploit or take advantage of consumers experiencing vulnerability. Priority 3 is in regards to deterring conduct that increases the likelihood and impact of harm to consumers affected by family violence. Priority 4 is in regards to market integrity, and we have committed to investigating conduct that reduces consumer trust in the market and where this conduct may undermine the integrity of the market and stifle competition. And priority 4 is a focus on conduct impacting First Nations people. We will prioritise our compliance efforts to encourage businesses to meaningfully engage with First Nations Victorians and tailor their communication, engagement and consumer support to meet community needs. This includes working in genuine partnership with First Nations communities to improve access to information that supports energy and water security. While the compliance and enforcement priorities are commission-wide, how we apply them in each sector is different based on the characteristics of that sector. These characteristics include the regulatory instruments that are available to us, the maturity of the sector and the compliance culture of the sector, and whether there are other levers available to us that could be more effective or achieve the desired behaviour change that we would be seeking. Our posture we take in each sector may be stable for some time, or it may vary based on changes in the external environment, changes in the conduct of businesses, or changes in community expectations. We have a number of examples now of enforcement outcomes across all of our different sectors that we regulate. In the energy sector in particular, you may have seen that Origin Energy was penalised $17.6 million for failing to provide best offer messaging and failing to provide support to customers experiencing payment difficulty. Sumo Energy was fined $10 million for failings in best offer messaging and unlawful door knocking. And for the Victorian Energy Upgrades Program, a number of accreditations for accredited providers have been suspended for between 3 and 6 months for fraudulent practices. And with regard to the water sector, I'm sure you're all well aware of the actions that we've taken in the water sector to achieve enforceable undertakings. So we don't need to go into specific details in today's session. But another example of an action that I wanted to draw your attention to is the fact that we sent a letter to all water businesses in December last year regarding our expectation for compliance with price determinations and our concerns about a number of price determination breaches that had come to our attention. So that's an example of a compliance action that we will and have taken in the water sector. I'm going to hand over to Sharon now and look forward to having a further conversation with you throughout the rest of the session. Thanks, Sharon.
Thanks, Rebecca. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Sharon Deano. I am the Director of Compliance and Enforcement in the Energy Division, but we also do enforcement matters with regard to referrals in relation to the water industry. I'm relatively new to the Commission. I joined in April 2024. Prior to the coming to the ESC, I had quite a long career at the ACCC doing mostly consumer protection matters. So today, I was going to talk a little bit about our approach to enforcement investigations, our approach to risk-based compliance with regard to how we triage our matters. And in particular, I appreciate that quite a number of water businesses may have not had any experience with regard to an enforcement investigation. So I also wanted to demystify that process and talk a little bit about what happens in that process. Today, I'm not going to talk about any specific past investigations or any current open investigations, as it's not quite the right forum for it. But if anyone in the forum has some further follow-up questions that they want to speak to me about, I'm more than happy to set up a follow-up discussion separately if you think that would be useful. So if we can just get the slide 7 up. Thank you. Talk a little bit about how we approach our compliance and enforcement function at the ESC. Generally, the Commission uses its compliance and enforcement powers in the public interest. And most of you will appreciate it's not possible for us to take enforcement action with regard to every reported breach that comes to our attention. And that's the case for every industry that we regulate, not just in water. So as a consequence, we necessarily need to prioritise matters to ensure that our limited resources are used effectively to maximise compliance with the law, and also ensure that our actions result in specific and general deterrence to prevent future breaches of legal obligations. Releasing our compliance and enforcement priorities provides us a really important signal to businesses in understanding the type of matters that we're likely to closely scrutinise and investigate. So our approach this year has varied from previous years, as the focus this year has been more about the impact of conduct to consumers rather than specific conduct itself. So what this means is that, for example, rather than saying one of our priorities is around the legal obligations regarding to billing, instead what we said is we're looking closely at conduct that exacerbate the cost of living for consumers. So what that might mean is that you could have a breach of some of the billing obligations, two different breaches or two similar breaches side by side, but one might have significant consumer harm, result in consumer harm, the other might not. And so we're looking at it from impact outcome perspective, or the extent of harm that's caused by the conduct, in terms of how we might prioritise it with regard to further enforcement investigations. It's also important that our priorities are set up this way so that they can apply across the various industries that we regulate. And it reflects our broader shift within the Commission with regard to focusing on work that achieves certain outcomes and impacts rather than just outputs. So it allows us to have a bit more nuanced flexibility in terms of identifying harm caused by conduct and ensuring that our regulatory response is both proportionate and reasonable to that conduct. One thing I will mention is that just because something doesn't squarely fall within our current priorities doesn't mean that we'll necessarily refrain from taking action. Like I said, if it's conduct that results in significant widespread consumer harm, then it's more likely that we will probably take a look at it, even if it doesn't squarely fall within our priorities. Our priorities are set up just so that we use it more like a filter, and it means that matters are put up top of the pile compared to others, because these are our focuses for this year. If we go to the next slide on our risk-based approach to enforcement. As I said earlier, not every matter reported to us results in necessarily an enforcement outcome. We have a range of our own regulatory tools that are available to us, depending on the matters that we have. Where possible, our preference is to use preventative tools that prevent breaches, such as issuing guidelines, use of industry letters and industry forums. These types of tools are probably more familiar within the water industry than some of the other tools that we have. Using preventative tools approach helps us prevent harm altogether, and it allows businesses to rise to best practice rather than rely on bare minimum compliance. If those proactive approaches don't work and businesses lapse into non-compliance, then we also have other enforcement tools designed for specific and general deterrence. Those things include things like court action, undertakings, penalty notices, and warning letters. However, we also acknowledge that many businesses experience lapses in compliance for a variety of reasons, and they can happen for a lot of reasons. Some of them are not intentional necessarily, but can include things like technology failures, human error, insufficient training, failed internal systems, or poorly implemented change management projects. Some of these lapses in compliance result in really widespread consumer harm. Sometimes they result in very minimal disruption, if any at all. So as a general principle, we try and attempt to assess the extent of harm caused by conduct. What is the scale of it? How many customers were impacted and the dollar amounts? What was the misery caused by the conduct? What was the direct impact to customers, for example? And was it preventable? In the context of considering what response we might have from a regulatory perspective, we'll also consider what remediation has already been offered by the by the business to respond to harm that's been caused, and what preventative measures will be put in place to deter future non-compliant conduct. From my perspective, I see best practices business being proactive with their compliance efforts, including having in place internal mechanisms to detect non-compliant conduct. When non-compliance is detected at the earliest opportunity, it does allow a business to contain the issue, report it, and limit ongoing costs that could arise from it continuing into non-compliance. In determining the appropriate enforcement response to non-compliant behaviour, we also consider past behaviours and the culture of compliance within the business. It is therefore much better for us to find out about an issue directly from a business itself rather than going through other parties. If we find out through customers, for example, or other third parties, this often results in more extensive information and document gathering than if it was self-reported. If you can go to the next slide. Yeah, so what to expect in relation to enforcement investigation. We've done a few water enforcement matters so far, but not a significant number. And I know that there have been a number of water businesses that haven't had to face an investigation to date. So I just wanted to set out what it's all about and also maybe demystify that process. For the most part, an enforcement investigation is really about fact finding. So we do this with an open mind. We have had some investigations in the past that have resulted in closure at an early point, because once we gathered the relevant facts, we found that there actually wasn't a breach based on the information that we gathered. So, you know, for a large part of it, we just actually really want to understand what happened and what the facts were. And we have a variety of tools available to us to do this, including the use of voluntary requests for information, which we normally do by way of a letter. We meet with the regulated businesses to understand the context and further information required to understand information that's already been provided to us. We can also use what we call Section 37 notices. These are notices that compel businesses to provide information or documents that are related to a contravention. A failure to comply with those notices carries with it some serious consequences, including potential criminal offences. And we can also conduct compulsory oral examinations of employees or agents of regulated entities. And these examinations are usually conducted by a barrister under oath. After we go through a fact-finding process, we often then make recommendations to commissioners with regard to an outcome. And so before we do that, though, we normally do provide a regulated entity a summary of the facts that we've gathered and an opportunity to provide any submissions before a decision is made by commissioners regarding an enforcement outcome. We do that by through a process where we provide an invitation for submissions to the business. And in response to that, sometimes businesses provide admissions that they might want to make with regard to any conduct. They might talk about any remedial steps that they've taken since the commencement of the investigation, and any other offers to resolve the matter that which we may take into account when putting forward recommendations to commissioners. Offers to resolve the matter include things like commitments for redress or remediation, or the offer of an informal undertaking, or even an enforceable undertaking. We do have a range of tools available to us for serious breaches. With regard to breaches of the water industry standard, we are able to commence court action to seek declarations or injunctive relief. We're also able to seek a court enforceable undertaking as part of that process. A water business can offer us an undertaking as well in response to contravening conduct. And in certain circumstances, we can also use our regulatory discretion to take no further action if we are satisfied that remediation or redress has been completed on a voluntary basis. With regard to breaches of price determination rules, they give rise to other powers, which also include issuing of penalty notices. So after that happens, we normally provide a recommendation to commissioners about one of these enforcement actions. And once that decision has been made, then we will communicate that with the business. Post-investigation, Sometimes this arises just depending on the type of enforcement action that arises. There are some circumstances where there may be ongoing monitoring or reporting after the closure of an enforcement investigation. For example, if an undertaking has been offered, which entails certain things to be done by a certain time frame, for example, audits to be undertaken or payment of redress to be done by a certain time, then generally the compliance team will continue to communicate with the business to ensure that those obligations have been met. And finally, looking at reopening of an investigation. So it happens quite rarely, but in some limited circumstances, we may reopen an investigation after its closure if we've been provided with incomplete or inaccurate information, which was used to form a basis to close the matter. So therefore, we encourage businesses to be clear and accurate with the information provided to us to avoid this type of situation. In circumstances where it becomes known at a later date that information provided to us is inaccurate or incomplete, we do expect that businesses would be proactive in notifying us of the situation in order for us to ensure that we're able to determine what further action, if any, is warranted at the earliest possible opportunity. So that's just a very brief run through with regard to our processes. At the end, I'm also happy to take further questions on, and I'll next pass to Ange. Thank you.
Thanks, Sharon. So I just want to talk a little bit about, obviously Sharon's taken us through, I guess, what happens on the enforcement side. I want to talk a little bit about my team and the work we do on the compliance side and what to expect when working with the Commission when a business identifies matters that you consider may have material adverse impacts on customers. And I'll also share some reflections on the past 19 months so you can sort of improve your own self-reporting and compliance. So our compliance role in water, while we've always had a compliance role in the water sector, from the 1st of April 2024, we introduced a new requirement for businesses to formally report any potential or actual non-compliance that has a material impact or affects customers experiencing family violence. With reference to our compliance and enforcement priorities, I'd like to take you through some specific areas that are more likely to have material adverse impact on customers, particularly if the matters are widespread. So I think it's slide 10. So one of the priorities around taking action to address practices that exacerbate the cost of living pressures. So businesses should be thinking about their billing and pricing practices, particularly any conduct resulting in unexpected or excessive bill shock. Should also be thinking about failures to apply any concessions or credits and instances of overcharging. The next priority that is probably of most relevance is holding businesses accountable when they fail to provide consumers experiencing vulnerability with fair and equitable access. So we will be monitoring and act when businesses place obstacles that hinder consumers experiencing vulnerability from connecting, staying connected, or getting help. And we'll continue working closely with the Energy and Water Ombudsman, financial counsellors, and consumer advocacy groups to improve outcomes for consumers experiencing vulnerability. The next priority that is probably of relevance is to deter conduct that increases the likelihood and impact of harm to consumers affected by family violence. So we will be building on insights from our Safety by Design partnership to encourage businesses to adopt safe design practices, and we'll monitor and act where businesses fail to protect the accounts of customers affected by family violence. And then the last priority there is around focusing on conduct impacting First Nations people. So that's around practices that exclude or systematically disadvantage First Nations people, including practices that disproportionately affect, target or cause harm to First Nations people. As Sharon mentioned, we really do support a voluntary compliance with the water industry standards, and we prefer to work with businesses and with the sector to increase and promote compliance. So we do this by providing guidance, and we have published two guidelines to help the sector meet self-reporting obligations and understand the back billing provisions. We also raise awareness. We recently wrote to all water business managing directors and regulatory managers about the issues being reported to us that are putting customers affected by family violence at risk. And we'll also hold forums such as today's sessions. So we don't just focus on compliance, we also work with you to enhance the quality of the sector-wide response through our work on collating better practice examples for the Family Violence Response Handbook and by engaging experts to design a roadmap for safety by design in essential services. So what can you expect when you work with the water compliance team? As mentioned by Sharon, it's really important that you communicate openly and early when it comes to matters relating to your obligations to report breaches to us. If you and your colleagues are unsure whether non-compliance is a material adverse impact and must be reported, we suggest you give us a call or send through an initial report while you continue with your investigation, rather than waiting until the investigation is finalised. Keeping in mind that not all non-compliance that impacts customers affected by family violence, keeping in mind that all non-compliance that impacts customers affected by family violence must be reported. So our team uses phone calls and email primarily to communicate with you. We prefer breaches or potential breaches to come via the water compliance email inbox, as this is monitored by the team several times a day. It also has limited access, which helps us manage any sensitive information you need to include in a report. Some businesses choose to call ahead and give us an advance notice to expect a report, particularly in instances of non-compliance against customers affected by family violence. This can be helpful to your business where you are still exploring the most appropriate form of customer support and redress. My team can also assist by sharing better practice responses from other water businesses or from other sectors. Some businesses request meetings to have early conversations on issues that might cause non-compliance, like billing system upgrades and changes in debt collection practice, and we consider these valuable discussions as they provide an opportunity to share views and insights that prevent breaches from occurring. So I just want to give a bit of a reflection after 19 months of the obligation to report coming into effect. The obligation to report was introduced into the water industry standards after consultation with the water sector and came into effect, as I said, on the 1st of April 2024. I note that there are some water businesses who have not reported any non-compliance in that time, and if anyone is unsure about what needs to be reported, our team will be very happy to meet with you to discuss any concerns you might have about reporting. So over that time, we have received 32 reports of non-compliance, and not all of them ended up having a material adverse impact after the business completed its investigation, or it was a view we came to based on the information available to us at that time. We have sent 2 letters to the sector and some warning letters to individual businesses. We have identified some family violence themes that we have communicated back to the sector and seen an uplift in the pace and quality of customer redress. We've been very encouraged to see that some businesses have adopted safety by design principles when they are responding to non-compliance and looking for ways to improve their compliance culture and increase safety for all of their customers. So that brings us to the end of our formal presentation, and we're now happy to take questions. As noted at the beginning, you can either put your hand up or you can put your questions into the chat and we'll answer them. Any?
We might have a silent group here today, Anne.
We might. Okay. Okay.
Well, here we go, Sean.
Oh, no, I've
I'm
got Sean.
happy to get the ball rolling. I guess I take from you, Angelina, as we really sort of, find our way in terms of reporting requirements, you're encouraging us to be proactive and reach out and test each case with you.
Yep.
just wanted to sort of, test that with you in terms of the message from today.
Yeah. So the team is happy to have those kind of conversations, and I think, one of the things that we hope has come strongly through this seminar is around this sort of proactive approach and some of those early discussions, because through that, we can help you navigate the process, but also, you might also help you start thinking about, well, what is the customer impact and what remedial actions might you be able to take before it gets to a point where, we may need to take action. So definitely encourage that. So Rebecca, I might have a question for you. Why did we extend the priorities to water?
Thanks for that, Dorothy Dixon. And
you're welcome.
So I think people are well aware that over the past 5 or so years, the Commission has progressively become more of what is known as an active regulator, and in our other sectors, we have had additional compliance and enforcement powers provided to us through legislative change. There has also been an increased expectation, both through the government, through engagement with our community sectors, and through the commissioners and the makeup of the new commission under Jared as chair, that we need to be very focused on utilising all of our regulatory tools across all of our sectors to work in the interests of the long-term interests of consumers and to take action where we see consumer harm. And so while we may have less regulatory tools in the water sector, it's absolutely our strategy and our regulatory posture to treat water as similarly as other sectors and to be an active regulator in the water sector.
Thanks, Rebecca. Have we got any other questions from the group? So I guess one of the other questions I think we have had through our discussions with businesses is around the Commission reporting back to the sector on reported breaches, so that industry can learn from each other. Sharon, do you just want to explain why, I guess, we don't, extensively share that information broadly?
So, Ange, in terms of breach reports coming through?
Yeah, and then sharing, yeah.
I think I'm happy to sort of share more on a general basis, but I think it's also about sort of we want to encourage businesses to come forward in a candid way, and as part of that, building trust in that process. It's not necessary. We don't want to kind of create any inadvertent or unintentional further embarrassment to a business. I think for the most part, businesses, as I know, are always doing their best to try and step into compliance. A lot of what we see through non-compliance is through inadvertence or some sort of systems failure. It's important for businesses to have a chance, I think, to remediate that and to sort out their systems without necessarily being made an example of in that context when appropriate. When we do take enforcement action that results in an undertaking or sometimes through taking court action, that is made public. And one of the key purposes around that is for general deterrence, which I suppose provides for that broader industry learning or understanding. But there are also a variety of ways, I think, for businesses to uplift their compliance knowledge and capability. And one of those is also having some regular discussions, either with the compliance team or with our enforcement team as well. So I encourage doing it that way. Where possible, when appropriate, we will provide case studies across the board, but it's not always the most appropriate vehicle to kind of share that knowledge.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Sharon. Are there any more? We've got Elizabeth has a question.
Thanks. I just want to build on the comment made by Rebecca in terms of do you think the ESC does have the right enforcement tools for the water sector? From experience, you've got the enforceable undertaking, which can be a 24-month process and quite a burden on public water corporations. So yeah, putting it back to you, do you think you've got the right tools?
That's a very, very pointed question, Liz. Look, at the end of the day, it is a policy decision of government or Parliament to provide us with the legislative, the regulatory tools, and there has been independent reviews of the energy sector and of the Victorian energy upgrades that has resulted in reforms, that has resulted in legislative change. My personal view is that I don't think that there has been the burning platform to date in the water sector to initiate that. But I think that regardless of that, from a more positive perspective, there is definitely community expectation that is aligned with government policy in regards to protecting consumers, particularly consumers who are vulnerable. And, you know, we've seen that through the action that we've taken in response to the Royal Commission for Family Violence. And with the increasing cost of living pressures and the risks to people who are in hardship, you know, there should be no surprise as to why those have been the specific focus of us in terms of our reporting expectations on the water businesses, and where we have taken action on water businesses.
Thanks, Rebecca. If there's no more questions, last call. We might wrap it up a little bit early. No, it doesn't look like we have any more questions. So I'll just do a little bit of a recap. Hopefully out of this session, you can take away that the compliance enforcement priorities are really a tool to assist you to maintain your compliance and to avoid customer harms. That we're here to work with you and not to catch you out. And that to that end, we value your candour in the discussions and the information that you provide us. And that where we can work together to improve practice, we will. Yeah, so thank you all for joining us. I hope you found the session informative and useful. If you have any more questions, you can email us at the compliance email, which is water.compliance@esc.vic.gov.au. And as I said at the beginning, we will send a short wrap-up email with links to the recording and a very short survey that we appreciate you filling in. So thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.